everybody. My name is Stacy Purslow. I coordinate the New Hampshire Farm to School program. I'm located at the University of New Hampshire. I also facilitate the New Hampshire School and Youth Garden Network. And this is the first of 7 winter and spring webinars that Farm to School and the School Garden Network are offering this year. So today's webinar is about school orchards, and I'm going to pass it off to Richard Hodges, who runs ReTreeUs, to share about school orchards and school gardens.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for tuning in this afternoon. If you're just joining, kind of in the chat, we're just plugging in where we're tuning in from today and what role we might play in the school garden world. Yeah, again, Richard Hodges, and founder and program manager of ReTreeUs, and ReTreeUs plants orchards in schools, and we support school gardens, particularly with the Back to School Garden program. So what I'm going to do today is kind of overview our orchard program and the Back to School Garden program, but with the lens of trying to provide things that can be applicable whether you participate in one of our programs or not, or are interested in our programs or not. There's practices and lessons that we've learned over the course of 11 years doing school orchards, and been working with school gardens for about 15 years and troubleshooting all the way, and trying to come up with solutions. So there's a lot that can be applied to it. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of overview our orchard program and general tips for home orcharding or school orcharding, and then open it up for questions. And then we'll dive into the Back to School Garden program, and we can dive into questions after that as well. And then just make sure, send everybody off with plenty of resources. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen and just kind of give an overview of ReTreeUs, and go from there. And the orchard, so slideshow, play from the start. There we go. So ReTreeUs is dedicated to promoting an environmentally sustainable, socially just food system. Really, we plant orchards in schools and school gardens, as I just mentioned. So most of our orchards, we've done about 92 at this point. Most of them are in schools, on school grounds, and some are also with partner nonprofit organizations. This, as I said, we planted 12 more this year, so this slide's a little outdated. And you can tell, though, that we are, this is kind of our footprint. We're not in Montana yet, but we can certainly share some things that might help folks tuning in from Montana today. Haven't gotten down to Connecticut, but it's not off the list of possibilities. So other than adding more to this list, this is kind of a snapshot of where we're at. So kind of we provide the programming for the orchard program. Is orchard caretaking is really important. So with the orchard caretakers, we're not really having folks necessarily climb up in trees like this. I just thought it was a great photo when I was putting this together. And but yeah, not necessarily trying to send people up in trees with saws right away. But we're trying to equip folks at schools to be able to care for their trees. So we have we return after we plant an orchard and do some pruning workshops. We'll do grafting workshops. We also have an orchard caretaker newsletter, and that provides curriculum connections, and provides seasonal updates. So there's a lot of folks, you don't have to necessarily be a school orchard caretaker to sign up for that newsletter, and I'll show you how to do that after this. But there's just seasonal tips that are really helpful on how to maintain fruit trees, and also educational connections that can allow you to use fruit trees as an outdoor classroom. And so all the orchards we do have educational signage. And so this is kind of a general sign that is at the entrance of all the orchards, kind of so folks can do self-guided tours and why is there an orchard here? So talking about the environmental benefits of wildlife habitat, preventing erosion, creating oxygen, absorbing carbon dioxide, and just general soil retention and improvement, and also carbon offsets and the benefits of growing your food locally and the environmental benefits of that, and how good fruit trees are for us for in creating a space that's also enjoyable and healthy space to get outside is really important. So kind of a view. ReTree started in Maine. You can see it's very Maine heavy still. All the orchard locations. We're kind of a regional program now. Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, but New England is kind of our footprint, but we're a part of a larger network called the Giving Grove that has programs throughout the country that I can also talk about a little bit later. But apples have a really interesting history, starting out in forests in Asia, and kind of I saw some footage of some of the ancient apple forests and really neat varieties of apples, and then kind of just have migrated over time, and it's just a fascinating history. So this is just a little tidbit that folks can read about. There's apples in their orchard. And then pollination, very important and great concept for connecting folks with the kind of interdependence of nature, and how by stewarding fruit trees we can improve environmental conditions and provide food and shelter for pollinators that really we rely on, because we couldn't be without bees, really. And so there's a lot of benefits, like I'm talking about, to school orchards. So many learning opportunities, experiential learning, outdoor classrooms. Some students don't really thrive in indoor classrooms, and once they get outside, it's a different world. And so it's really important, I believe, to provide students with outdoor and indoor learning opportunities. So provides that, and fresh fruit is great. And it's also, new opportunities when learning about growing fruit trees. It might inspire somebody to pursue a career path, or grow fruit trees at home. And generally, it's just a nice thing to add to a school campus or anywhere, really, unless you deal with challenges. So, one thing about fruit trees, and I think a lot of folks' reticence in doing fruit trees, is they can have pests, and there can be issues if there's somebody sets out with good intentions to plant fruit trees, and maybe gets pulled in some other direction because life happens. So maybe lack of time, lack of experience caring for fruit trees. There's a lot of things that can cause problems to fruit trees, and maybe create eyesores on campus that people aren't really wanting to see. So I think there's a lot of reservations sometimes in planting fruit trees. So what we try to do is I'll answer some of the solutions to some of these issues, so that if you have fruit trees at home that you're wanting to care for, or if you're thinking of making the leap into school orchards. These are some solutions. Again, we have the orchard caretaker newsletter that kind of provides a lot of this information. So these next couple slides are just examples of that. Deer really love young apple trees. So if you have deer, you might need to put up deer fencing. We've actually changed this model a little bit. Don't use the wooden grade stakes anymore. Just use one metal post because the grade stakes can degrade. So anyway, just making sure that the trees are cared for properly is really important, and that you're confronting issues as they come out. Trees are also a great learning opportunity for folks because troubleshooting and finding solutions is always helpful and a good training for your brain. So mulching trees, especially in public spaces, is really important. We recommend that orchard caretakers mulch trees every spring, and a lot of times we'll recommend cardboard around the base of the tree, which just breaks down over time. It's a good opportunity to teach about decomposition, because by the fall there's not much cardboard left, and it creates more organic matter as that all happens. It also keeps the trees from it makes it look nice, and it keeps them from getting weed pressure and perhaps pressure from weed whackers, which can also cause problems. Recommendations on summer watering. Fruit trees need on average about an inch of rain. So especially the first couple of years, just making sure you're watering properly and like fully soaking in deep and not just watering the surface. So that requires like returning back to the tree. If you're watering fruit trees, I recommend watering a couple gallons on a tree slowly, and then letting it sit for a while, and then coming back and doing another couple gallons. One of the biggest things I've noticed, and excuse this picture, we're updating a lot of things. So, but what you see there is rodent protection, because big thing is, especially up in the Northeast, we have a lot of voles in the wintertime. They look like mice, not moles, but voles. And they'll kind of burrow underneath the snow. They're protected from birds of prey and other things under the snow. So they like to eat around the base of the tree. And something I always teach about is how the living part of the tree is the outside of the tree, the cambium. So that's why if you see, a stump of a tree, you can count the rings, because every year it grows out. And so if the living part of the tree is the outside, the cambium, what'll happen if a rodent eats all the way around it? And it will kill the tree. And if it doesn't get all the way around it, it'll definitely stifle it and make it more prone to disease and other things. So and other pests. So really protecting the bases of the trees is really important. And then, yeah, other things from the Orchard Caretaker newsletter. And just, generally want to put out some considerations, because obviously we're limited in our reach, and can't be in Montana, can't be everywhere. So if you're interested in planting your own fruit trees, some good considerations. Sun, they need full sun exposure, good soil, and proper pH is really important as well. And there's a lot you can get into, with school gardens and orchards, talking about soil science. It's a great entryway, and how important pH is to keeping trees and plants in general healthy, so that they can actually absorb the nutrients that may be there. And then drainage, especially with a lot of the rain we've been getting, you want to make sure that fruit trees are planted in areas where there's, on a hillside or really good drainage, so that the roots aren't rotting pretty much in the ground. But they don't want don't want too much water, but also don't want too little water. So always be thinking about water access, and are you really going to be able to water your trees, especially the first couple years, wherever you're planting them. Um, there's a couple different ways to get fruit trees. You can get bare root trees. There's some really great nurseries, including Bedcoat Trees, Rain Tree Nursery. And you can order them, and they typically ship in the spring. So you can get large trees that way, less expensive. But it's very time sensitive, and you have to keep the roots moist until you get in the ground. They're a little they're less expensive. They're not root bound. That's some of the benefits of them, and easy to transport. Get them a lot less expensive. What we do with our program now is we get bare root trees and we pot them up in large pots with a soil blend that we put together, and then care for the trees in our nursery over the summer, and allow those root structures to really get settled. And we use holistic sprays to just give them a really good growing season and to get settled into a soil medium, and then plant them in the fall. After years of trial and error, found that to be the best. So that's something you couldn't do on your own. You can also, some nurseries have better fruit trees than others. I would recommend against the potted trees coming from like some of the box stores, where it's just super confined, and the leaves and branches of the tree are a lot bigger than the base. Trees eventually do want to kind of mirror their roots with their branches. So if you're seeing a big lack of balance, that's probably something to be aware of. And sometimes you'll plant something that looks good and it won't grow for a couple of years until the roots can get things figured out. So potted trees, they all have benefits. And if you're planting potted trees, typically recommend planting in September, October in the Northeast, because then you don't have to worry about watering as much, and it's less stress for the trees if you're able to care for them well over the summer. There's a lot of, we'll go over some more orchard lessons as well, but our website has some access to orchard-based lessons, the agriculture in the classroom website, also kidsgardening.org. There's a lot of ways to involve students in lessons that are aligned to curriculum in schools. And for kind of open up the conversation more to questions folks might have about fruit trees in general, or school orchards, just want to show a couple more resources. So starting with our website, actually, so ReTreeUs. This is our website. There's access to some of the things we're going to be talking about. This is the Orchard Caretaker newsletter here. You can subscribe, and you can apply. So all the school orchards we do, folks go on and they'll apply for an orchard. And it's got a form that you can fill out from there. So there's also learning. So we've created a couple of our own lessons just to make it super easy for folks to incorporate orchards as outdoor classrooms. So this one's kind of neat. It's a PowerPoint presentation that's really easy to utilize, that really dives into how it's kind of the science behind pollination, but also as it applies specifically to fruit trees. There's a couple lessons there. We're going to be adding more learning resources as well here, so you can kind of use it as a springboard to find other resources. And then finally, we're also kind of updating this website, so don't get too familiar with how it looks. But there's we have our YouTube channel that kind of, if you're interested in learning about kind of how the school orchard program works, it's unfortunately, it'd be a lot more looking like me. So It's kind of flashy. It's good. The person who did it did a really good job. But you know, it kind of dives into all the things we're talking about, and what we're doing before go do a planting now is sharing this with the schools that we're going to be planting at, so that they think that I'm a celebrity, even though anybody can make a YouTube channel. And also, it kind of overviews all the lessons, kind of dives into grafting. You know, always talk about the FBI, about fungus, bacteria, and invertebrates. So whenever I bring up the FBI, it seems to really get people on their toes. But yeah, the decomposers. So this is our YouTube channel, and you can just search YouTube ReTreeUs and be able to find it there. But yeah, it really dives into what to expect with an orchard planting, and some lessons that you could do. You could even model this and copy me and do your own thing. It's fine. And so yeah, kind of breeze through the orchard program we do, some suggestions for planting fruit trees at home or in your own world, and kind of some of the resources that we have, and just wanted to kind of open up for questions that might be coming up for folks. And you can either unmute and say them, or throw them in the chat. Uh, And after that, we'll kind of dive into the back to school garden program, and talk more about that.
This is Anne. I'm on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Thank you very much for your talk. And I was wondering, do you have any experience with planting indigenous gardens and using indigenous trees in that planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're fortunate in New Hampshire here to have the New Hampshire State Nursery, that you can actually get pretty inexpensive trees um, that are grown from seed, typically from native tree stocks of hazelnut, uh, beach plums, elderberry, serviceberry,
Wait,
blueberry.
yeah, hazelnut, beech plum,
Yep.
elderberry, and
Yep.
serviceberry?
Yeah.
SER, like service?
Yeah. Service, or yeah, it has a few different names, but it's also another common name is Juneberry, uh, Shadbush.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got a few different names, but yeah, Serviceberry will get you there. Um, and yeah, I recommend it. You know, I found that growing those things are less prone to issues. So especially, yeah, hazelnuts are really great, and they grow kind of native and wild out in the forest edge, just naturally, but folks don't usually recognize them because the nuts are kind of covered in like a green casing, and the squirrels get them as soon as they're ripe. Um, and um,
So you're talking about the state nursery in Boscawen?
yes,
Is that called the state farm nursery or the state nursery?
yeah, I think New Hampshire State
Mm.
Nursery. Um,
New
and
Hampshire State Nursery. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah. And when you say these beach plums, elderberries, and all that, have they been in New Hampshire for thousands of years? Are these long-standing species?
um, so certainly hazelnut and serviceberry, beach plum. I mean, it's definitely regional, like coastal. Um, pretty sure up in coastal New Hampshire, but it was definitely affected by um, people and kind of settling in coastal areas. But yeah, I mean, beach plum kind of runs down. They're really popular in Cape Cod and Cape May, New Jersey, and such. A lot of places named after beach plums. But yep, so very long time. Yep, they're native trees and plants.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And have you ever worked with incorporating them into a vegetable garden setting?
Yeah, so they grow a little
The
smaller.
trees
So
and the garden. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, hazelnuts make a really nice hedge, especially if you plant them a little closer. Um, and um, and beach plums can go right into it. There's a few different ways to incorporate them kind of into a garden setting. I mean, they do grow larger, so it's definitely a consideration if it's a garden setting, how large they can grow. Um,
Mhm.
and elderberry plays pretty nice as well. But usually the berries need to be processed. And it looks like Stacy put the link to the website for the New Hampshire State Nursery in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, but
Thank you
you're
very
calling it
much. That's very helpful.
yeah. Yeah, happy to, no problem. Um, and then so what do we spray on the trees? So like compost tea or fish emulsion. Just it really like populates the leaves and gives some nutrients to the leaves in the tree, which really kind of give it some extra health. And the healthier the trees are, the less prone to pests and disease they are. On some, you don't want to spray it on pears, but neem oil is a completely natural organic oil. We don't spray it at schools and typically don't spray anything at schools. Some school folks who go through the proper channels of approval spray like compost tea or fish emulsion on their trees, and just doing that by putting biodiversity on the leaves itself. It really helps prevent fungus and disease from kind of taking over. But it does kind of wash off every rain. And so it needs to be done pretty, and you don't want to do it during the heat of the day either. So, but definitely do that in our nursery, and it really helps the trees a lot. And how has the longevity of, so Eric's question, how has the longevity of your orchards been? Have the schools maintained them 3 to 5 years? How to ensure success long term? So that's a great question. We started it 11 years ago as kind of a labor of love, and learned a lot over the time and figured out things. So some of the early ones, we might have planted 92 orchards at this point, but I know for a fact that at least 2 of them aren't there anymore because of deer or other things. So you definitely learn a lot as you're going. But we've developed a lot of practices and ways to assure better longevity. And some just, happen, it's the soil. Like, so yeah, we have orchards that are 10 years old that with huge apple trees and produce tons of fruit, and tons of peaches. Peaches have a quicker turnaround in terms of production. So yeah, certainly have like both ends of the spectrum, like orchards that have not done well and orchards that really thrive. And so over time, we're implementing practices to maximize. And so that's why I think 4 years ago we switched from doing any bare root plantings at schools to growing them in our own nursery and planting them in the fall. So if you're familiar, planting garlic, planting a fruit tree in the fall is similar to that, in that you plant it and the roots keep growing even after the leaves fall, and then kind of the winter weather comes and it snow cover, all the things, and then in the spring it's totally in the ground ready to go. So it really helps a lot planting fruit trees in the fall. We've found, as long as they're healthy trees to begin with. So that and the proper rodent protection, coaching folks. So that with the orchard caretaker program, as I said, a lot of the school orchards have to apply on our website. That's the biggest thing we're looking for in the application is like, who's going to be the orchard caretaker? Is the school going to take ownership over it? And what we're doing now is trying to actually pay stipends to orchard caretakers. So because that's something that I believe in both for school gardens and for school orchards is that, it's great that folks are willing and able to do it on a volunteer capacity. And there's a lot of instances of great success that way with really dedicated people. But for these models to be really replicated and sustainable, trying to figure out ways to create funding for those positions. So even if you're, putting in maybe more time, just the act of some payment certainly helps accountability and the longevity of it. So that's something that we're continuing to develop as well. But yeah, really good questions.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So we're up here in Montana, and it's this week's supposed to hit like -26, and I was wondering, are there any trees you'd recommend that are extremely hardy? I know in those temperatures you have to sometimes cover them, but otherwise, are there any that would be good in an area like this that gets so cold?
There certainly are, and some of the apple varieties, but yeah, apples can be more susceptible to some extreme cold. A lot of times maybe going more the smaller fruit and nut shrubs. I don't really know. I could certainly point you in the direction of resources. So one of our affiliates through the Giving Grove is in Denver, which is, it gets pretty cold and but yeah, not quite as cold as Montana, I don't think. But can certainly point you in the right direction. There are folks certainly doing that. Good question. Yeah, I know that there are some fruit trees that can grow in zone 3. So, I'm sure there's plenty out there. A little more research. We typically do apples, peaches, pears, both European and Asian. But yeah, depending on like the further north in Maine you go, it comes more just apples and European pears. And kind of the varieties we pick are ones that we know are as disease and pest resistant and cold hardy as possible. So kind of have our own palette that we work from in that realm. But yeah, I'll yeah, research that. That'll be good. Oh, I think Stacy's got something. Okay. Great. Thanks, Stacy. It's a great resource, montana.edu. So let's see. Yeah, if there's no other questions about orchard program right now, I'm just gonna breeze through the back to school garden program because it's an approach, and again, it's not something that you can take learnings from it and apply them as you will. But mentioning that been kind of in the realm of school orchards and gardens for just about 2 decades, and kind of really experienced a lot with that. So this is our website that I'm sharing now, and oh, yeah, you are seeing my screen, right? Okay, with the ReTreeUs website?
Yes.
Okay. Um, so back to school garden programs, you can access it from our website. Is really the idea is to minimize summer maintenance and kind of align school gardens to the school calendar. Uh, because that's one thing that's difficult with school gardens is summertime is usually the best time to grow, and there's nobody on site unless there's a robust garden program, or at least somebody paid to maintain the gardens, or should be paid. And or sometimes there's really good networks of coordinated volunteers that are able to maintain them. But that is a big issue that's been facing school gardens for a long time, is how to handle summer maintenance. So kind of the approach with the back to school garden is kind of focusing on plants that have minimal maintenance, and then really focusing on the fall. So there's some videos here that kind of break it down. Got to start adding these to Coast of Maine. Soils helped us do some, and this is from their YouTube channel. But so there's some resources there. But if this is kind of the school garden that you're might be thinking of because of the way things are, and people having good intentions, kind of after doing school orchards in places like this, I couldn't help but want to do something with school gardens. There's actually a lot of good herbs in here that we did take out before doing this. But the idea is in the spring to really think about mulching. So we use recycled paper that's listed for use in gardens, and it's just kind of organic or sorry, natural wood fiber, and that kind of goes into this recycled paper. And so we lay that out, kind of rough up the soil, lay that out a couple layers thick, and then mulching. So that's the approach with gardens, and when we actually do this on our like production flower home farm, kind of on a different scale. But you can see these students are holding down the plastic and then spreading a couple inches of finished compost. Nice stuff about this Coast of Maine compost is that it is completely finished, and you can actually seed directly in it, and it's pretty weed free. So just the process of doing that, and then again, since it's finished compost, you can seed directly into it. On the YouTube videos that we have, we kind of demonstrate doing a Three Sisters garden in this approach. And so now with our back to school garden programs, we have schools that go to local farms and pick up all these materials. So they'll pick up seeds, they'll pick up compost, they'll pick up the rolls of paper, and they'll also pick up seedlings. So in the spring, like popping corn seedlings. The idea with popping corn is that it can grow throughout the summer, and then it needs to dry out on the stalk anyway to cure. And so you don't have to, it's not like sweet corn where you need to harvest it at just the right time. If nobody's there, it can just hang out drying on the stalk. Similarly with some winter squash, you can direct seed that directly into the soil. And also dry beans can also dry on the stalk of popping corn. So Three Sisters Garden is a good utilization for this. Of course, that's a practice that's been utilized by Native people in this area for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So the idea with that is it's kind of low maintenance crops, and that you're not growing weeds. The big thing is over the summer you're kind of improving your soil with this approach, and as that paper biodegrades, it's also creating really great organic matter and decomposing any weeds. So the paper is typically gone in the fall, and you can just see what happens. And if you come back to squash and popping corn and dry beans, that's great. And in the fall. So this is back when we're distributing the seedlings. Don't drive around with the seedlings anymore, just have schools go to regional hubs. And so right now we have 4 regional hubs where schools will go pick up their seedlings. They're mostly in Maine, where participating schools will drive in the spring and kind of, you'll see, I'll share the YouTube page that has kind of breaks down the process a lot better than I might be as a talking head right now. But the idea is kale, spinach, and lettuce grows really great September with a September planting, but they need to be established to plant it in September. Maybe spinach, we could try direct seeding because it doesn't actually really love being transplanted that way. But kale and lettuce loves to be transplanted in September. So having local farms grow nice, healthy seedlings that schools can plant whole trays worth and fill, significant beds with, really increases the amount of yield for the cafeteria. And also, kale is really nutrient dense, and some really great lettuce varieties as well. And then we're also providing row cover now with kind of hoops for the row cover. So so that's the idea with the Back to School Garden program, is to get folks to align their gardens with the school calendar a little better. So on the YouTube channel for ReTreeUs, we've got there's playlists. So there's a playlist that's the planting a school orchard, and then there's Back to School Gardens. And so,
Hi,
oh gosh, you're already seeing me. So this is new. So yeah, the more people that view it, we need some more views. That'd be great. And so it kind of goes over the whole process from the background that I guess I'm able to do it here in 1 minute and 33 seconds with the help of the video producer, who she did a great job with. And so probably this whole time I've been talking for 10 minutes or so, probably just needed to watch that 1 minute and 33-second video. But it goes into picking up the supplies, goes into the Three Sisters garden I was talking about, planting in the spring, and then fall harvest of those crops, and then picking up fall seedlings and planting the fall garden. So kind of that's the approach there with the Back to School garden, and really mulching. And you can really, like, the cardboard and compost, or cardboard and mulch, and the recycled paper and compost. I mean, you could just cover a whole area with those things and not till, and have a great garden that way. And it's a really great way to kind of explore low maintenance and no-till agriculture, and really improve productivity in schools. So that's the Back to School Garden program. That is the school garden piece that we kind of offer with ReTreeUs. And want to just open up questions about that program as well, and that approach that can be more widely utilized. We're certainly not the only ones doing sheet mulching or lasagna gardening, but I think it's a great application for school gardens, and just a really great way to build organic matter, and working on kind of developing more lessons about decomposition and the FBI, and also about building organic matter. They're finding that that can be a great way to sequester carbon in the soil. Is organic matter is kind of an indicator of how much carbon you're storing in your soil as well. So a lot of things to be to go up there. Yeah, and so we have done cardboard. I mean, not in the school and not in the beds themselves. I mean, I certainly do that in other areas, but not necessarily like in a raised bed situation. Just the paper decomposes faster and it's a lot easier to use and less likely to have, you know, some maybe synthetic glues in it. You know, I think the only thing other than the paper fiber is there might be some adhesive that's typically completely natural and decomposes, you know, and that's one thing that we have researched is, you know, in an era where making sure that we're not building like putting chemicals into the soil, the paper we use just kind of completely biodegrades and doesn't really leave any residuals. Where I think cardboard not likely to do much, and fruit trees don't really pick up those sorts of things as easily as say like kale. But yeah, so in garden beds typically don't do cardboard, but I use a lot of cardboard for mulching. And you know, cardboard and paper are some of my favorite ingredients for gardening.
Could you explain what a lasagna garden is?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's the same. So what we did there was just paper and compost. And that's a pretty like a 2-layer lasagna is kind of relatively boring, I guess. But like you could also put on, you know, seaweed. Maybe rinse some seaweed or leave some seaweed out in the rain to make sure it's not salty, and then lay that on top, and then maybe add another layer of compost. Or, you know, it depends on what you have access to in terms of organic material. You know, if you're able to have straw that doesn't necessarily have a lot of like weed seeds in it, or just you know, let's see,
So it's
seaweed.
better to layer it than it is to mix it all in together?
Yeah, leaves are a great addition. Thanks, Stacy. Well, it can be. It depends. You know, tilling, like tilling your soil can um, kind of bring down the amount of biological life in the soil. And it's also kind of more arduous, and you also bring up a lot of weed seeds when you do that, that could have been dormant deep in the soil for a long time, or like digging or that sort of thing. But kind of the lasagna approach is that, you know, it'll decompose, and you don't really need to till it or stir it up. Sometimes, you know, it depends on the materials you're using and how much lasagna you're going for. You might need to move some of the material in order to plant if it's too much kind of brown material like straw or leaves or things like that. But typically, if it in an ideal world, um, it'll just decompose and then you don't have to really stir it up.
I see. Well, I
Uh,
wasn't thinking so much of filling it, but just mixing it in together. But you're
Sure.
suggesting that it's better when you layer it, as opposed to just gently mixing different ingredients together of brown and green like you would in like a compost.
Yeah, I mean, I think the benefits of layering it is you can like, yeah, get that compost effect, by especially if you kind of top layer is a more, you know, compost cover, then it's gonna kind of create that underneath it. But you know, there's a lot that goes into and many ways to do it. So I'm sure that mixing it can have its benefits and layering it can also. But you know, in theory, kind of that's the concept with lasagna gardening.
Hmm, thank
But it's
you.
all, you know, sheet mulching. It's all using materials to build soils, rather, and it's kind of less uh, invasive to the life of the soil, and easier, I think. So a lot of applications for it. Um, So I see a question here about do you ever do any educational workshops to follow up with schools about fruit tree care and pruning after planted orchards? Yes, we do. I do that and would like to do it more. trying to figure out models for being more like virtual. Like that's kind of the idea with the YouTube channels, because of how many school orchards we have now and how spread out we are. But definitely when I can, and I've gone to schools and kind of demonstrated grafting. So putting like multiple apple varieties on one apple tree, which is really fascinating concept and great way to kind of talk about genetics and all sorts of things that go from there. But yeah, return for pruning and grafting workshops, and trying to get back to more of the existing school orchards for that, with the full knowledge after all this time doing it of being single person and trying to like be more than one person. So the more that we can do work, also do workshops where, folks will come and learn about grafting and pruning at one site, and then go out and be able to do that kind of on their own. So trainings are easier, but certainly go back to school orchards and do pruning and grafting and tree care conversations. I'll also mention that, one of the things that goes into in the video series about the planting an orchard that I didn't really get into is more about cardboard and compost. So in the spring, at any of the school orchards that we're going to be planting, so we do about 12 or 14 every year, including community projects. But we'll go out in the spring and kind of measure out and like work with students and talk about all these considerations about fruit trees, measure proper spacing for the trees, and then lay down cardboard with compost on top of that, so that the areas where they're going to be planting the fruit trees, that sod is breaking down and creating good life in the soil, and then the cardboard is done, not there in the fall. And then we'll plant the orchard in the fall. Just, a lot of enthusiasm for cardboard and paper and compost and wood chips. So well, got about 5 minutes left. So kind of gone through the orchard program, kind of suggestions for home fruit trees or school fruit trees if you're doing it on your own, and then went through the back to school garden program and kind of shared some resources. But we can perhaps send a follow-up email with kind of more of those resources so that they're more at folks' fingertips. If that is that possible, Stacy?
Sure.
Um, Great. And so if in the last couple minutes, if anybody has one other question, can probably do that. So I haven't done any composting programs at schools. I've seen a lot of them done. And yeah, I have also noticed that schools are sometimes nervous about composting because of pests and such. So it really depends on uh, the climate at the school in terms of willingness to dive into stuff. But yeah, schools that have just gone all for it and not been too worried about it have had a lot of success. One thing that I would say about that is that I think it's a matter of, so we're talking about like the browns and the greens, like so green being like the nitrogen rich and the browns being kind of more fibrous additions in compost. So adding, so the stuff that comes out of say a cafeteria can be really green, like, and really hefty and smelly. Just especially if you have, so folks with horse manure, especially if it's coming from somebody who has a horse farm without any sprays or chemicals, horse manure is great for covering it. So I think a lot of the places that have had a lot of success, they deal with things immediately and cover it with one of the brown materials pretty immediately. Whether it's adding manure or some other material like leaves to keep smell and other critters at bay. Jen, I see your hand raised.
Hi. Yes, I was on the phone for a moment through not through the Zoom chat per se, so I didn't hear everything when I switched over, but I thought I heard something about um finding the right alignment with the school calendar and planting certain vegetables at the right time. And I thought, that would be a dream to get that going, and wondering if you lean into any particular resources for that. And if you already mentioned it, I'm sorry, I might have missed it.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. So the back to school garden program is kind of what really the approach there, and it's kind of like a holistic program that has its own approach and its own methodology as it applies to schools, because we'll work with like a local farm that's able to grow seedlings that are ready to plant in September. And so I am interested in learning about more farms that might want to participate that. We pay the farms for like trays of kale and lettuce and spinach for that purpose. So, always interested in learning about, typically they're like educational or nonprofit farms, because what we pay them for the trays that they're providing for the schools isn't necessarily worth it in terms of the amount of work that they might have to do in terms of facilitating resources for this coming on, and then school teachers coming to their farm to pick up materials for that purpose. So it is an approach, and we'll share the resources about the back to school garden program that can be utilized, whether or not it's participating in the way that we're administering the program. But lettuce, kale, and spinach do great planted in September. And especially if you use a little row cover, you can grow your kale until the snow crushes it. And then if you're planting in September, chances are that it'll come back in the spring as well. And you'll just have to harvest it quickly before it goes to seed. So yeah, if you can get your hands on, or if you can coax a local farmer or a garden center to grow. Yeah, if you have your greenhouse, or if you can get somebody to grow things, they need to be seeded in July or end of July typically, to get them to the proper size for September planting.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about now for spring. So that's why I wanted to check those resources.
Yeah, so there it's like in the spring, you can grow radishes before direct seed before school lets out. They can harvest them right before school ends. And then the approach with the back to school garden program is we're trying to mulch the beds, lay down paper and compost before students leave in June. But yeah, we'll send some follow-up material on that.
Thank you.
No problem. Well, yeah, and with the follow-up material, we'll give my email address so folks can follow up with me if there's any further questions. And yeah, thanks for taking time on this afternoon to explore these things, and really appreciate the work that everybody does, getting kids outside and growing food and thinking about where food comes from. There's a reason why I dedicated my life to this, and a lot of folks have here on this call. So it's great work, and appreciate everybody's effort.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
everybody,
you
and thank
very
you,
much.
Richard.
Thank you.
This is recorded, so it will end up on the New Hampshire Farm to School website as a resource for anybody that wants to share it or view it again. Our next webinar in our webinar series is January 31st, and I'll be doing that one on the new New Hampshire Harvest of the Month program. We revised our program to be more culturally sensitive and include the cultural diversity in the state in our program materials. So that is something that's coming up. And even if you're from Montana, a lot of states have Harvest of the Month programs. So it might be something like, hey, if your state's not doing something to address cultural diversity, maybe you might learn something that you could bring back to your state. So thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.